Marino Camino starts at Annesley Bridge over the Talca River and into Fairview up to Malahide. The Talca River, that's the anglicised form of the flood river. It was a major flood area, and because of that, the bottom of the Talca River was called Mud Island. It's where all the really poor people lived, including some Fenian ne'er-do-wells. Fairview Park itself is reclaimed land that the corporation built in the early 20th century. The Talca River was a major issue. Ballybough went into Fairview. If you look at the sign, it's both Fairview and Ballybough. So there was an issue there as to where one ended and the other began. Some people from in Binton Bluden there is a famous engineer who helped build Dublin Bay, and Dublin owes a huge debt of gratitude to these people. He's got a road in East Wall, Stony Road, called after him. So just outside of a few circles, Mr. Stoney would have been mostly forgotten, but he's not the only one who is forgotten. These engineers, they stopped the Talca flooding perennially. They rebuilt Fairview, and they gave us the Dublin that we inherited. So major feats building Dublin Bay that we see there, with the Talca flowing into it. Now, the Black and Tan War, for example, was fought up to essentially Annesley Bridge. Fairview was out in the country. It's where the countryside began. And the interesting thing is that a lot of the leaders of 1916 happened to live around Fairview, and they don't have one plaque, one monument or anything else to them. It's really as if they never existed. Although there is a statue to Sean Russell and a plaque to the Irish Citizen Army, even those are problematic. The Irish Citizen Army plaque is on the grounds of St. Joseph's School, we will talk about in a second, and the Sean Russell statue is a very significant landmark, but and controversial because pro-British elements living in Clontarf regularly vandalise it, and they would be connected to the Tom Kettle school of thought that we would come to later on. They also try to highlight the case of Declan Griffin, who is a homosexual who was robbed and murdered there many years ago. That is the fight over the common area of Dublin. Sean Russell has a statue, and the others would like that statue removed and their own agenda put there. Now, there are many contenders for this limited space. Sean Russell, there's his vandalised statue. He got a huge reception when the statue was put up in the 1950s, and that's Muriel MacDonagh, the wife of Thomas MacDonagh, the 1916 leader, who was drowned in Skerries just a couple of years after, sister of Grace Gifford. Rosie Hackett there from Fairview has a bridge called after her. Maureen Potter, who entertained Hitler, buried in Clontarf graveyard. Kathleen Clarke lived with 1916 hero Thomas in Fairview, as did Eamon Kent and Cathal Brugha, the famous athlete, and Specky Griffin, who was one of Michael Collins's top men. His shop is still there. There's Eamon Kent. And there's Charlie Haughey. Now, the very interesting thing about Charlie Haughey, who went to St. Joseph's School on a scholarship, as did all his equally impoverished brothers, is that the Christian brothers allowed, along with his mother's very hard work, social climbing by the Haughey family and by many others. Charlie Haughey and especially his brother Jock Haughey were great footballers and hurlers, but without the Christian brothers, who were mad into Gaelic football and pushing people to the intermediate cert, the Haughey's would never succeeded, and nor would many others. The St. Joseph's School, it was one of the key schools of the Christian brothers. There's Haughey with George Colley, another government minister. So these rich and poor came together, and the Christian brothers helped push them along. And Joey's had been their training school, and they were amongst the first cohort that did the leaving cert in St. Joseph's School, under Brother O'Kane, with De Valera there, and with Charlie Haughey there. He's one of the great Christian brothers. He taught Austin Deasy, the Fine Gael minister down in Waterford, and the drive and so on of those Christian brothers allowed the Haughey's and generations others, not only in Joey's but elsewhere, to thrive on the Gaelic football fields and in the examination halls and the universities that they went on to. Now, we're going to move on ourselves, and when we go down to the end of Fairview Strand, we come to Marino Crescent, and we'll be taking the road to the left up past Marino and onwards to the Santry River, where we have already been and spoken about. So we're looking now at Marino Crescent, at the birthplace of Bram Stoker. Bram Stoker was the author, of course, of Dracula, and he had a lady friend from number 1, I believe. Carleton, William Carleton, the notorious sectarian, also lived there, as did the Boland family, who we'll come to later on. Now, the significance of Stoker, besides writing Dracula, is Mud Island and the various graves and slums inspired him. We have there the trains going northwards. We've already looked at Harry Boland. There's the Russian royal family. Their crown jewels were hidden by Harry Boland in the fireplace in Marino Crescent, and the Royal Irish Constabulary obviously had a big interest in Mr. Harry Boland, because he was a boyo, to say the least. Now, the thing about Marino Crescent, so they say, is it was built to block the view from the Marino. The Marino was named after Marino in Italy, and it was one of those follies, the biggest and best in Ireland, a very expensive replica of a Roman villa with all kinds of newfangled gadgets in it for the 17th century. It had tunnels in it where apparently Harry Boland tested the Tommy guns for the IRA during the Black and Tan War. But in more urbane times, Lord Charlemont lived there, played croquet, hung around, had a great time, and when he wasn't shooting grouse or whatever the horsey set did, he'd be admiring the view from his Marino casino over the fertile plains leading down to Dublin Bay. So this thing cost a fortune, and he'd put his oxter on the thing and gaze over Dublin Bay. And if he was there now, he'd be seeing GAA fields, because a whole pile of people moved in to the area, and the view is certainly long gone now. But the story goes that Lord Charlemont liked nothing better than to hang around and look over Dublin Bay, and this other character started to build Marino Crescent, which blocked his view, as you can probably see there. Now, to add insult to injury, the Lord, he's got a very hard to pronounce name. He made the back of the houses of Marino Crescent particularly ugly and the opposite of uniform, just to really get a rise out of Lord Charlemont. Some people dispute that story, because obviously Lord Charlemont would have put a contract out on him and had him thrown into Dublin Bay along with Marino Crescent. But that's not what happened. The crescent was built, and gradually views like one had at Marino started to vanish, and this process continues today with building left, right and centre. Now, Lord Charlemont's estate has been nibbled away at since. The Marino Crescent was only the beginning of it. So even though he had a fortune, he was the Bill Gates or Arthur Guinness of his day. All good things must pass, and gradually Dublin has expanded up the Malahide Road and out to Howth and so on. And Marino Crescent is just one small little oasis. It's an architectural wonderland itself. That curve is very, very unusual. There's no great plaques to Bram Stoker or anybody else, because the people living there don't want people arriving noon and night taking selfies of their houses. They have a lovely little park, and they'd like to keep it that way. Now, when you look up the Malahide Road, you can see Lord Charlemont would be looking at a lot of concrete if he was around today. And nice and all as his estate was, we now have a new Dublin with all these various housing estates. And in a future video, we look at the actual houses, because there's a great story to them. Of course, Marino Casino is just like looking at Buckingham Palace or Windsor or the Viceregal Lodge up in the Phoenix Park, where the president lives. But there's a great story in all the other houses. If you go up along the Malahide Road, you've got all these little artisan cottages where the skivvies for Lord Charlemont lived. You had the nuns and the Christian brothers gradually moved in and bought the bigger places. And you had various housing estates like Marino, which was a huge success, a garden city built in the 1920s, was built there for really upwardly mobile people. So Marino Crescent, when it was built, it has its own huge history, but it was just part of this process that you can see in the background. Those houses in Marino, the Marino estate, were a garden city modelled on similar cities in Europe, and the Cumann Ale government of the 1920s was justly very, very proud of it. They were expensive for the upwardly mobile in Dublin, but it really started a process of house ownership that reached its peak in Ireland in the late 2000s, when Ireland and Britain had the highest rates of home ownership in the world. So here in the Malahide Road we have these various histories. We have the history of the Marino Crescent with Bram Stoker and the Horsey Set, and we also have Harry Boland and so on too. Now that church there is interesting in that that's at the corner of Marino Crescent, because the vicar there, he started Clontarf Golf Club, an ecumenical golf club up the Malahide Road beside Mount Temple School. A Presbyterian, an Anglican vicar and a Catholic priest all started it together. Kevin Heffernan of Heffo of St Vincent's and the Dublin GAA team ended up being president of it, and the Clontarf Golf Club formed a guard of honour at his funeral. Clontarf Golf Club is beside Mount Temple School, and it's one of the big bits of green still left on the Malahide Road, on the lower end of the Malahide Road. One of the problems with these bits of green is they're too valuable for housing developers who just want to slop concrete wherever they see the chance. These places are nice, but of course now they'd be very difficult to maintain. The problem with the Marino estate was, for most people, they were actually too expensive. There was a fantastic development by the Cumming Ale government, but Fianna Fáil, who replaced them in the early 1930s, saw their chance, and they really made IKEA type houses significantly cheaper than the houses in the Marino estate, and the Haughey family moved into one of those houses in Donycarney. Brenton Bean and so on, the writer from Mud Island, moved into similar houses out in Kimmage, and these houses, though much cheaper than the Marino houses, were very well built, and the fact that Fianna Fáil could sell them, could house a lot more people, helped to make Fianna Fáil the party of the working class. There's the former Artane Boys School that we'll come to in a second, just beside the casino. So the Lord Charlemon's Day passed, the day of the big houses passed, and through schools like St Joseph's and the Artane Boys Band, etc., the days of the Mickey Mudd and Paddy Stink, as James Joyce put it, came in. That began with the Marino development, and the Artane Boys Band, who were a feature of All Ireland's for very many years, a very famous band, and had some very famous drummers like Larry Mullen, who plays for U2. He started his days there. Now we move on to Donycarney Church. The National Graves Association there are outside Donycarney Church, laying a plaque for those who died for Ireland from the area. There's Charlie Haughey's funeral. Other people use Donycarney Church for other reasons, and people celebrate all kinds of things from there, not least the great success of the St Vincent's GAA team, who built the Dubs. There's also the thing that the Kettle family, very controversial family, used to farm around there. Now we continue up the road past the former Kettle farms and the birthplace of Catherine Macaulay, who founded the Sisters of Mercy, up to the Santry River, where Tato used to have its very innovative factory, and we reached the Santry River again through the well of St. Brendan, and they have their memories, we have ours, and we will go out with Banjo Barney from Donycarney.